Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Dijkgraaf. I'm the director of the Institute for Advanced Study, and so warm welcome to all of you to this family science talk. For those of you who have never been here, you might wonder, where did I end up? And actually, it is kind of a special day today. Does any of the children know what the name of this day is? Pi Day. And why it's called Pi Day? Yes, it's a number. Pi is a number between 3 and 4. In fact, it's 3.14 and ago. And if you round it up, it's 3.1416, actually. And the day today is the 3rd, the 14th of March. No, not 15. Sorry, thank you. So last year was even better, but today it's March 14th, and but it's another special day because of the number. Does anybody know why it's a special day too today? Yeah, what about Einstein? It was even more important. Doesn't know. It was about Einstein. What happened in his life on the 14th of March? Think about what is the most important date in your life. Yeah, it's his birthday. So we're celebrating Einstein's birthday. And Einstein was born in Germany, but for a long time, the last 22 years, he actually worked here in Princeton, here at this institute. So one way to think about we are doing here is doing the same thing that Albert Einstein did, thinking very deeply about all kind of problems. And in these talks, we have had a few more talks, and we looked at the really the frontiers of where you can go, how far you can go. We went to the beginning of time, the smallest particles, to the largest numbers. And today I'm very happy that our speaker will bring us to somewhere where even fewer people have went. I think, Donato, you will tell me if it's right, but I think fewer people went to the bottom of the ocean than to the moon. So we're going to explore the deep sea. And I'm very happy that our speaker today, Donato Giovannelli, is a visitor here at the program. He is a biologist, a marine biologist. He explores the deep sea. He knows more about it than anything else. And it's an absolutely fascinating topic. He got his PhD a few years ago in the University of Napoli. He's now a postdoctoral fellow. So he's a researcher at Rutgers University. He's quite often here, collaborating with other scientists in our program of interdisciplinary studies. And he also got an important prize recently. He got the Deep Carbon Observatory Emerging Leader Award for what he has been doing in his research. But I think perhaps the most important thing is what he's doing is, I would say, really cool. We all have a fantasy of traveling undersea. We all have been, I think most of us have been in airplanes. I think very few of us have been in submarines. I definitely haven't. So I'm kind of jealous of what you are all experiencing, and so I feel this coming hour is ours opportunity to learn a little bit from your world. Daarna. A warm
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks to the Institute for inviting me. And I usually don't speak to a crowd of so many kids, so I'm very excited today. How many of you like space? How many people like space here? I love space. I thought about exploring space since I was a kid. I wanted to be an astronaut, in fact. And then I realized that, I was looking at a picture like this one. What you see in a picture like this one? What is this? Yes, the ocean. Exactly. This is Earth, but the first sea you can see is blue. That's the most we see when we look at this picture. I was having a lot of this picture. I was looking at them, and my father spoke to me and told me, what you see in this picture? You see the ocean. It's blue. I said, what do you think? The big color is blue here. And the reality is that our planet is entirely covered by ocean. 1/3 of the planet is land. Everything else is ocean. And even if you look at the planet very far away, like this picture. Does somebody know what this picture is? Yes. Which one is the Earth? This small dot right here? This is a picture that was taken in 1990 by the Voyager probe that was sent far, far away outside our solar system, was stepping out, took a picture, and this is the light of the sun going through the planet, and that's the color we see, it's blue. So if we didn't know anything about Earth, and we look at a picture of an exoplanet, a faraway planet from far away, we will see this. The first guess would be, oh my God, there's an ocean there. How exciting. And speaking with my father, I realized that going to the sea and going to the space, they're not that different in many respects. And so during my career, I decided to move from being an astronaut to be what in the 70s, Cousteau was calling me an aquanaut. So an explorer of the ocean. And that's exactly the term they were using in the 70s. Now it's not used anymore, but aquanauts was pretty popular. There were underwater stations, marine stations, Cone Shelf 1 and 2. People in the 70s were dreaming of having cities underwater in the deep sea and spending time there researching and living there. But reality is that when people think about the ocean, they typically think about something like this. Colorful, full of corals, filled with beautiful fishes. How many of you have been close to coral reef? How many of you have seen a coral reef? Yeah, beautiful, right? Plenty of plenty of colors. And the reality is that this part of the ocean that we see here, the part where the light goes into, is a very, very small part of the ocean. This very tiny line up here. This is the only part of the ocean where light enters. Everything else is dark. And the ocean is very deep. Anybody knows how deep is the ocean? The deepest point in the ocean? Yes. What, sorry? Midnight zone. Okay, it's close. They call it twilight zone. So I have to say, we're close. How deep? Anybody knows how deep is the ocean? How much? 36,000 feet. 7 miles. 11 kilometers. It's deep. Anybody knows which one is the deepest, the highest mountain on Earth? Yes. The one in China. I'm not sure. Everest, yes. I'm not sure about the geography. I believe there's a section also in China. I'm not sure about that. You know how tall is it? Anybody knows Mount Everest, how tall is it? 5 miles. About 5 miles, 8.8 kilometers, 29,000 feet. You can fit the entire Mount Everest in the deepest point of the ocean, and you still have quite enough left above. You have, yes?
Hawaii is actually the highest point because it's underground.
You're correct.
Because it's actually, it's from the bottom of the ocean.
You're exactly correct. The highest mountain are actually the one that start at the seafloor. So the average depth is about here. They run about 4,000 meters from the seafloor, and then they run extra. One of the tallest mountain of Spain and Portugal is an island in the middle of the Atlantic, an island in the Azores called Pico, which is 2,200 meters tall, and then 2,500 meters tall from the seafloor, so it's more than 4 kilometers high. And you're exactly correct. That's the tallest one. And that's actually the height of which commercial jet typically fly. 10 kilometers, 33,000 feet, and they will still, from the bottom of the ocean, they will still be underwater. So it's a very, very deep place. And I put something into scale here. In scale, this will be the place where people are allowed to dive with scuba equipment, about 40 meters. And then you move a little bit more, 650 feet or 200 meters, that's where light disappears. All light is absorbed. Less than 1% of light gets deeper than that. So from down to the bottom, from 200 meters to 11 kilometers, is completely dark all the time. This is actually the record dive with open water. So special breathing apparatus, special equipment. That's the deepest human can go without using special vehicles. And then Anybody knows this one? Sperm whale? You like it? 1,000 meters, 3,500 feet depth. And then there are big animals that dive deeper. Yes? Yes. And what about this one? Yes. Giant squid. 2,500 meters, 8,000 feet. And then we get to this. Anybody knows? Yes. The Titanic. 3,800 meters. We're still not at the average depth of our ocean. So 2/3 of our planet are still deeper than this one. And here they are. Average depth of the ocean, 4 kilometers, 13,500 feet. And currently our research subs, they can get only to this depth. Anybody knows which submarine is this one? Our submarine, which one? Anybody knows which submarine? Yes. Is the Alvin, yes. And anybody knows how many submarines like the Alvin there are in the world? How many research submarines? Six. 6 submarines, only of 5 countries. So Russia has 2 submarines. There's a French Nautil. There's the Chinese, the Kijong, and the Shinkai from the Japanese. And then the US, which is the oldest one, by the way. In the 60s was launched the first time. And then we can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and we get to the deepest point on Earth, which is called the Challenger Deep, the Mariana Trench. And notice this. We've wrote so far. The problem is that in reality, we are not entirely sure that's the deepest place. There could be places that are still deeper. And in fact, this measurement has been debated and refined over the years a lot. At one point, it was just over 11,000 meters. Now it's just under, because you know, the way we measure depth in this place, anybody know how we measure depth in the ocean? Yes. Yes, exactly, with echoing sound. But there's a problem with echoing sound. The property of the water affect how fast the echo is traveling. So things like the amount of salt, the temperature, you need to adjust for all these things. So typically, you need to measure the entire profile of the seawater for temperature and salinity, density, and so on. And then you need to adjust your echo sounding to that. The problem is that it's not that straightforward to do, and the ship in the meantime is probably drifting and moving on the surface. Even with geodynamic positioning that keeps the ship very still in a single place, it becomes quite complicated. And more than that, we have not fully explored all the place around, so there may still be some places that are slightly deeper than that. So I re-put this into scale again. You can see just the top is the photic zone, what we call the photic zone, where light can penetrate. And this is the deepest place a human can dive. This is the average depth of the ocean. This is the deeper we can go with the research submarine, which is not that much if you think how deep is everything else, and that's the bottom of the ocean. So in reality, the majority of the work we do, the majority of the food we get, the majority of the goods we get from the ocean are from a top part called epipelagic, which means at the top of where things swim, literally. And that's what they call the photic zone, where light can penetrate. Everything going down is dark, always, permanently dark. And it's also cold. Anybody knows the temperature of the deep ocean? Oscillate between 0 and 3 degrees centigrade. So between 32 and 38 Fahrenheit. Is a permanently cold place. And of course, water doesn't freeze because there's salt dissolved in it. But it's cold and dark. And there's also another thing that happens in the deep ocean. What else happens when you go down? Yes? Pressure increases. Do you know what this is? This is a coffee cup, styrofoam cup. It's a very soft one. It's made of a polymer that is filled with air inside. Anybody wants to try to crush it? Yes? Go ahead. Try and then pass it behind. Pass it behind. Pass it behind. What we do, we usually, when we go at sea, we have fun and we play with kids. Usually we are in touch with school, and we give them some of those styrofoam cups, and the kids color them, and they give us back. And when we go at sea, we hang them outside the submarine, and we send them down. And the styrofoam cup goes from that one. Can you raise the cup up, please? Or what is left of it? Very, very little is left, I bet. And the styrofoam cup goes from that one that was about this big to this. Gets compressed by pressure and miniaturized. Please don't crush this, but if anybody wants to see them, this is a styrofoam cup. Look. And you can see it also here. You can hold it. Just don't crush it. You can make it, please, have it go around. And another one, please, have it go around. This is the effect of pressure. And you know, for us, it would be terrible to go down there, but the fish and the animal that live down there are actually adapted to the pressure. So the problem is when you bring them up. You bring them up, you decrease the pressure, and what does happen? Anybody guess what happens to deep sea fish when you bring them up? They blow up. They literally blow up. And usually it must be a very painful death. I feel sorry for them all the time. You can, anybody else wants to see the styrofoam cup? Go ahead. Pass it around. So we can maybe organize, if I have another cruise in the future, we can get the kids here at the Institute to prepare styrofoam cup. I'll bring them out. We send them to the bottom of the ocean, and then we bring them back. That would be nice for next time. So the reality is that most of the people, they look at the map of Earth. This is, I believe, from Google Earth print or something like that. They look at this. They see some shadows here. They see some small dotted islands. And they think the bottom is roughly flat. It's a big, flat surface. That's how people imagine the deep ocean. A flat place with no life, no animal, anything. But actually, the ocean is more like this. It's a rough terrain. There are mountains, there are canyons, there are landslides, there are earthquakes, there are storms, there are strong currents. It's a very dynamic place. And there's a beautiful cast iron model of the Earth in New York City Natural History Museum, where all the surface is done in scale. And you can touch how tall is Mount Everest with respect how deep is the Mariana Trench in this zone down here and this zone up here, how deep this cargo and how tall this mountain range is. You can really have a feeling, a sense of how things are. And it is remarkable because if you look at the planet and you see this, can you see this long scar that runs across here? And a long scar that runs across here, and then you see it here. Anybody knows what that scar is? Any guess? Yes. You know the name of the place? The place is called Ocean Ridges. Mid-ocean ridges, because for the majority of the time, they're sitting at the center of the ocean. It's a huge mountain range. It's 2.5 kilometers tall, sometimes 3 kilometers tall, sometimes more, like in the Azores Islands, when they go from the seafloor, or like Hawaii, when they go from the seafloor to the top. And there's a valley in the middle. And this valley is like 1.5 kilometer deep, 10 to 20 kilometers wide. And this is where the seafloor is growing over time. So that's where plate tectonic grow over time. And this is also, by the way, the longest continuous mountain range on Earth. It's more than almost 40,000 miles, more than 60,000 kilometers. And incidentally, is also the biggest and longest volcano on Earth, because the entire line you can see around here is actually one single giant volcano underwater. This is thank you very much. This is an image done with acoustic of the bottom of the middle ocean ridge, the Atlantic range. And you can see those are the two sides of the range. And then there's the Rift Valley in the middle, which is about 10 to 20 kilometers wide. And that's where actually the volcano is, where fresh eruption and fresh lava comes up all the time. And the rest of the seafloor looks like this. There are giant mountains with flat top, and gigantic mountain. And it happens that people think about the place as a quiet place, but Earth is everything but quiet down there. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this image before, and this is the inside of the Earth. Anybody knows how these layers are called? Any guess? Very, very good. And we have a mantle. The place where we're living is just a very, very thin peel on top of it. Yes? Yes, the crust. And then we have a mantle, which is mainly made by low silica content silicate magma. And then we have an inner core, which we believe is solid, mainly iron and nickel. And then we have this outer core here, which is also iron and nickel, together with some other stuff like carbide, carbon, but is melted. And there are convective flux there. And this is what makes work the Earth magnetic system, the geodynamo that protects us from the solar wind. And this has another effect. This flux of heat coming from the inside has another effect of Earth, which is driving the plate tectonic. And there's this very, very cool video in which you can see the magma rising to the middle ocean ridges, and you can see the middle ocean ridges growing apart. And they keep growing until they cool down enough that they start to fall down. They literally fall underneath of existing land. That's what happens near Chile, near Japan. The old cold crust collapses underneath. And this is an image of a section of what is happening. And you can see we have the heat coming up. There is driving eruption at the mid-ocean ridges. So we have new seafloor made all the time that works sideways. And then by the time the seafloor becomes very old, it's gonna encounter one of the big, what we call cratons, which is actually another name to call land masses. And they collide with land masses and they start to go down. And I brought here some of the freshest seafloor you can get. Those are pieces of basalt we collected at 3,000 meters depth in the East Pacific rise. This is fresh. This is the freshest piece of earth you can hold in your hand. This is from 2006 eruption in the East Pacific rise. And you can see one of the eruption here. This is an underwater robot that was taking a movie of an underwater eruption. This is Lau Basin. And this is about 2,500 meter depth. This is the NSF. They knew there was an eruption because they had seismometer down there. They sent a ship there as fast as they could to put a robot underwater and take this footage, which is actually pretty impressive. Anybody wants to touch, and only thing, be careful. The top of this rock, this is basalt, which is solidified lava, marine lava. The top of this basalt cools down so quickly that it become like glass. It's black, it's reflective. But it can also leave some splinters on the finger. So please be careful with the children. But we have few pieces we can have go around. They're big and heavy. You want to have it go around? I'll give you another one. This is a somehow bigger one. Please pass it around. Be careful with the splinter at the top. So literally in the, yes? Go ahead. You know, on the surface of the sea, nothing is visible. You don't see anything. One of the effects of this eruption is just throwing a lot of chemicals, especially heavy metals, into the ocean, and which is actually a good thing because all organisms to live, they need very small amount of chemicals and trace elements like iron, nickel, tungsten, molybdenum. And this is one of the few ways in which the planet is recycling things. It's literally a recycling mechanism. Things go down in subduction zone. I'm going to make you hear a trench soon. And things come back up. And this is a recycling mechanism that keeps the planet going. Yes?
So do the eruptions have any effect on land?
The deep sea eruption, they have no effect of land. They have an indirect effect, meaning then they push the crust a little bit on the side, and the crust has to walk until it meets land, and then it goes down. And when this happens, you get earthquake. So the big earthquake we had in Chile, or earthquake we have in Japan, or even the big earthquake we have in Nepal, ultimately is due by the movement of the plates that needs to move against each other. They accumulate stress, and then they release stress. Yes?
So doesn't it like get like warm in the ocean when it erupts? Like does it get like a little warmer?
The area around the place, it gets very warmer, as warm as 400 centigrade. So the water doesn't boil, because if you apply pressure to water, the boiling point drops. Increases, sorry, I was thinking the other way around. Increases. So the deeper you go, the higher the temperature needs to be for the water to boil, until it gets to a depth in which you have supercritical water, in which the water doesn't really boil anymore, they just phase separation. And this is a very peculiar point of in depth for the kind of work we do. And thank you. This is a ship. This is a ship passing on top of the deepest point of the ocean. This was a microphone that has been placed a few weeks ago at 11 kilometers down, a special designed microscope. And we're going to hear the ship passing on top, and then we're going to hear quiet, and then suddenly we're going to hear an earthquake. This is land that is going down, and you can actually hear the noise. And that's a big difference with space. Space is empty, there's no sound. This is quiet, and now in a few seconds you're going to hear an earthquake. You can hear whales also. Here is the earthquake. This is the crust moving. We literally hearing the top of the planet moving. And they move quite fast, between 10 and 20 centimeters a year. It's not a small movement. There's a lot of action going on. And this action is actually what opens oceans and closes ocean. And this system is called the Wilson cycle. So if you imagine taking a bit of crust with the mantle and you put a heat source on the middle, it's like taking a slab of, how you call it, wax, and putting a candle underneath. The center where the candle is starts to melt. And in this case, it's melting, it's melting, it's melting, and it's pushing the side apart. And you're actually opening what is called a basin there, and when the basin opens, usually fills with water. And you get an ocean, and then this is the situation in which, actually this is the situation in which the Atlantic Ocean is a relatively young ocean. You have a heat source at the center, the mid-Atlantic ridge, pushing on the side, and the crust is just pushing America and Europe far away from each other. Eventually, when they get far away enough, one of the two sides of this new crust becomes so heavy and so cold that it doesn't float anymore on top of the mantle, so it starts to sink down. And you get this zone, which are called subduction zone, and the earthquake we were hearing before is actually the noise of the old crust going down and sinking and melting again. Eventually, this process keeps going, keeps going. This is the situation in the Pacific right now, where you have an accretionary zone, the middle Pacific rise, and then you have subduction zone, like in Japan or Chile. And this is what creates this deep point in the earth, the trenches. This crust going down makes this dip in the crust. And then eventually, things start to go back until the two continents collides, and you get the formation of big mountains, and then over millions of years, they open again and they close. This is called a Wilson cycle. It's what has been reshaping the face of our planet for billions of years. It's also what makes high mountain range like Nepal mountain range and where Everest is possible. And it's quite a remarkable system. You look at these are the accretionary plates that I was showing you, and here there are no subduction. You see, there are no very deep scratch of things going under, like here. Look at these lines here. Look at these lines here. In these lines here, the plate is where it's going down. So we took a look around. We see it's dark. It's deep, there's a lot of pressure, it's cold, it's very active, there are storms, there are landslides, there are mountain collapsing, eruption. What does it live down there? What kind of animal live in this place? And you start to look at them, and you actually realize that most of the people that wrote sci-fi stuff about alien and space, they just took a walk to look at some of these animals because they're literally alien-like. So this is part of a small documentary that was done by BBC. And when you have no light, when you are in the surface, one way of masking yourself is mimicking the color of what you have around. So either the same color of the sands, or you are blue on the top if they look you from the top, and clear from the bottom, because if they look you from the bottom, you want to mix with the light outside. In the deep sea, the strategy to be invisible is to be transparent. So most of the things are transparent, are translucent. Despite not having light, they have beautiful big eyes. And this is because most of the animals in the deep sea, they use bioluminescence. They actually produce small flash of light. Does anybody know how do they produce light? They have a special cell, which is called photophore, where they keep some bacteria. And those bacteria do a wonderful trick with energy and a protein. They get excited and emits flashes of light. So they sit in the dark and they start to light up. And every time they light up, somebody responds. This guy, by the way, looks a lot like Alien in the movie. You should see it close the face. They really didn't invent anything. They just took some picture and that was the alien. And most of them are actually remarkable. And every time scientists go to the deep sea, we know so little that a new species, a new genus, or an entirely new class of animal comes up. There has been a project that finished in 2010, which was called the Census of Marine Life, where scientists all around the world, about 1,000 scientists, they decided to make a catalog of all living things in the sea. And they realized that was an impossible task. One of the main results of the project was actually to get hundreds of new species every month. Hundreds. Not just small things, big things. This is Puerto Rico Trench with about 2,500, 3,000 meters depth. That octopus we just saw is probably a new species. And every time they start to look around, new things come up. And the unfortunate fact is that not enough people are looking. So there's still a lot to do. And not just, you see now these small gelatinous, water-like, gummy-looking animals. There's a lot of big things that are down there that have been recently discovered. And some are truly out of an horror movie. Look at this guy here. Anybody knows what this is? Goblin fish. Close. Not the zombie shark, the goblin fish. Yes. Goblin shark or goblin fish. Yes. What, sorry? They're not sure if it's extinct or not. The thing is that since it's been discovered in the early 1900s, because it washed ashore after a tsunami, only 50 of them have been seen or caught. So there's not really anything I can tell you about its biology, because we only encountered 50 of them in more than 100 years. So not much we know about him. Then there are things like this. Anybody knows what this is? Anybody guessing how big it is? Yes. What, sorry? Nope. Is a close relative of jellyfish. But it's actually a couple of meters, 6 feet dimension. It's just floating around. It's a predator. Don't be fooled by this pretty appearance. It's just attracting other fish with this colorful part, and then it's just englobating them and eating them. Yes? Siphonophore. Yes, that's the name. That's the exact name, siphonophores. And there are hundreds of them. They're very difficult to, yes? They do. They do have stingers, and that's how they paralyze their prey. Those are very difficult to study because every time for a long time, the only way to study the deep sea was to throw down a big net, drag it around, and bring it up. But when you're done by gelatin like this one, what it comes up is like a chewed munch of amorphous blob of gelatin. You don't really know what you're capturing. You don't have no idea. So one of the few ways to actually know something about this is to explore, go down, and take a look. Let's see another animal. This one. Any guess? What kind of animal is this? Yes? No? It's a slug. Yes. And what about this guy here? Yes? No, it's a chimera fish. So those are cousin of the shark, meaning they have no bones. They're cartilaginous, like shark and rays. And what about this guy here? Anybody ever seen it? Yes?
The blobfish?
Yes, the blobfish. This is very well known. Do you know where the blobfish lives? Yes. Yes, very far down. But you know where? Where in the world? In which place? Only between Australia and New Zealand. That's the only place where it's been caught. And we actually think there may be very few of them, or it's going extinct because of warming of the seawater down there. It's a gelatinous fish, and I have to say, not a lot of fantasy when they invented the blob in the 80s, as far as a movie goes again. This guy here. Yes. Very good. You're an expert. Fantastic. Dumbo octopus. And most of the fishes in the deep sea, most of the animal, since there's very few food there, and I'm going to explain why in a second, they don't like to swim around and be active and be fast like tuna or other fish. They like to float around and save energy and maybe encounter something and hit it. So this guy is not crawling around like normal octopus would do with his leg. It's just flying using this wing, gently flapping the wings, just floating in the water. And this one here, this one is a more active. Yes? Yes? Vampire squid, very good. It's called vampire squid. It doesn't suck blood, but the inside of his arms, they have big teeth looking like appendix. And we have another guy here. Yes? Anyone else? Yes? Huh? No, it's of the family of the viper fish. Yes. And we can see here instead. That's really ugly to look at. What is this? The one before? This one is about 5 to 10 centimeters. In the deep sea, there are two adaptations. Either things remain very, very small, or they become huge. So either there's something called dwarfism or giantism. So those are the two ends of the scale. Either they live very, very long and very, very quiet and become very, very big, or they're very small, so they have a low energy maintenance. This is an anglerfish. This guy uses this photophore at the top here, the emits light, just swinging it around like a fishing rod to attract things. And when they come in front of him, it just opens the huge mouth and swallows them. And you can see it doesn't have that many fins. It's just big and blobby and just floating around. It's not an active predator. It just sits there swinging his rod up and down. This is a viper fish again. Huge teeth. Those are not that big. They're maybe 10 or 15 centimeters. And another siphonophore. And another one. Nice colors. Another anglerfish. Yes? Angler. I'm sorry. My subtle Italian accent sometimes gets on the way. This is another siphonophore. The diversity, I could have gone on and on and on. Please Google deep sea fishing. There's stuff that are incredible. And one thing you may have noticed is that the majority of the fish, they have huge, scary teeth coming out. This is because the place is pretty much empty. So when you find something, you want to be sure it doesn't escape. So there's a huge war going on all the time in the deep sea, where you got animals with huge teeth trying to catch any other animal passing by, even cannibalism. They eat each other if it's not mating season. That's at least what we know from few species that we studied. And here you can see a viperfish and a deep sea, I don't remember the name in English right now. And you can see it's throwing to the fence, the shrimp for the fence is throwing a cloud of bioluminescent liquid. It's making a cloud of light, so the viperfish is going to bite there and find nothing. There's a huge war going on all the time, and predators are the majority, and this is why. Because the majority of the food doesn't get produced on the deep sea. It's produced at the top where the light is, and then sinks slowly down. And this is what scientists call marine snow. So you got a constant flux of things going down. And anybody knows who produces the food on Earth? Who's at the basic of the food chain? Any guess? Yes? Part of it, but which kind of animal or plant do produce food? Yes? Phytoplankton, algae, and plants. They do a fantastic trick with light. They take light, and the algae and a type of bacteria, which is called cyanobacteria, that floats in this very thin layer of water at the top with light, makes a great trick. They take light, high energy photons, they pack them together, and they're able to make sugars out of CO2, carbon dioxide. So they take the carbon dioxide, they use the energy from the light, they pack it into sugar. So that's the way, on land, plants do. They're the primary producers, what we call them. They're the base of the trophic chain, the same up in the sea. And it's a remarkable trick. This is an animation of primary production, chlorophyll concentration, which is the substance that photosynthetic animal use to capture the photons and the light in the oceans. And the more green this cyano and green color you can see going around on Earth is where the photosynthesis is concentrated at the moment. But remember, this is only a 200-meter layer at the top. Everything else at the bottom is permanently dark, so there could not be photosynthesis. All the food that gets to the deep ocean comes raining from the top. Of course, if juicy stuff pass around, people are eating. So by the time you get to the end of the seafloor, everything has been eaten away. There's very little reaching the seafloor. That's why scientists for a very long time thought that the deep sea was a dead place. Very little animal just going there once in a while. This was called the azoic hypothesis, and until the 1950s was actually very much believed so. So dead place, this is a typical dead lava, no sediments, no animals, no fish. There's really not much we need to do going there. There had been few expeditions that showed the animals were there, but still the majority of scientists, though, because of cold, pressure, little food, what the heck? Why anybody wants to live there? Then in 1970s, scientists were going around looking at those mid-ocean ridges I showed you before. And there have been a number of expeditions going on, like the French-American, the famous expedition in the middle Atlantic region. They were looking for a place where this hot lava, boiling lava, and water were interactive. They were interested in the water that gets warm and that comes up and the chemical that brings, but they searched for a long time in the middle Atlantic region. They didn't find anything. Then in 1977, they were south of the Galapagos Island. I always find this fascinating because, Darwin, the Galapagos, the theory of evolution, and then scientists are dragging a camera, a device called Angus, like 5 meters above the seafloor, 2,000 meters deep. They're just dragging this camera around. And this camera is taking one picture every 10 seconds, keeps taking picture. So they drag this camera for something like, I'm sorry, I took a note on this because it's astonishing. They drag the camera for about 16 kilometers. Just keep dragging the camera, blind. And at a certain point, the Angus runs out of film. They pull it up. They develop the film still on the ship. Remember, those were the days when you manually develop the film and go look into it. You have roughly 3,000 pictures. And they start to go around 3,000 pictures one by one. And for the first 1,500 pictures, that's what they see. Nothing different, nothing changed. And then, for only 13 pictures, 13 pictures. That's what they see. And you can see these white spots here. You can see there are some white points here. And that's what they found down there. They've seen some giant mussels, huge white mussels. 13 photograms. And then 1,500 more empty. Back to this, nothing else. But they had another hint that that was something special. You know, at one point they found other of these dead shell in a place, and scientists concluded that some ship had lunch and dropped shells down. Seriously. I mean, why you would expect such a concentration of animal in a place where there's no food? But one of the hints they had here is that the temperature of the water went from 2 degrees to 8 degrees. Only in this place. So there was an increase in temperature. And they said, my God, there's something interesting going in here. They sent the Alvin there. This was February 1977, 17 February 1977. And they sent the Alvin down, one pilot, 2 scientists. And there's the recording of the talk between one of the scientists, Jeb Collins, Oregon University, and his student at the top in the ship. And they're talking. And Jeb Collins is asking his student, listen, but don't we say that the deep sea is a dead place? And the student is, yeah, completely dead. There's almost no life, very little. And he says, so, you know, why am I seeing a ton of life here? I think we've been wrong all this time. We need to rewrite books. And what they have found is the deep sea hydrothermal vents. Those are giant chimney of precipitated metals. So this hot water that comes out from heating with the magma comes out, all the metal precipitates and forms this column, which are 10, 20, 30, up to 80 meters tall, and giant column. And you can see on the surface of this column, it looks like there are small hair, but those are actually animal. And the top is spewing hot fluid at 340 or 350 degrees. And the animal live very, very close. You can see sort of smoke-like coming out from the side. And they called the first deep sea vent they encountered, they called it the Garden of Heaven. That's the first place where they got. And over time, we discovered deep sea vents all over the world. And this is the example. You remember the picture I showed you before of a dead place, nothing around? This is what a deep sea vent looks like. The amount of biomass, the amount of animal you have in a single place is comparable to the rainforest. There's a huge diversity and a lot of animal, and all concentrated in one place. All, if you want, they like spa and sauna and thermal bath. They're all hanging around where hot water is coming out. And so the scientists started asking why we have this amount of animals here. Why here and not somewhere else? Must be something to do with the hot water. There must be food either produced or coming out from these hot waters. Otherwise, it doesn't explain. The amount of food that is coming from the top to the bottom is exactly the same everywhere. The reason for which we get this is a process called chemosynthesis, which is very similar to what plants do, which is called photosynthesis. So literally, they synthesize sugar using high energy photons from light. In this case, the animal, the bacteria, and the archaea, figure out how to use the energy, the chemical bond energy stored in volcanic gas and substances. Things like hydrogen, methane, hydrogen sulfide, things that are normally poisonous for life. Bacteria at the deep sea floor near vents, they figure out how to use it with CO2 and produce sugar. And this is a remarkable trick that they're doing down there. And they're doing it in a lot more than we thought it was possible. And not only, we knew there was this system of producing sugar, but we never knew they could sustain such a high biomass and amount of life. This is one of the typical worms that you find in the deep sea. This is called Alvinella pompeiana from Pompeii, the town that was buried under the lava from the Vesuvio. They called it this way because this animal lives around 80 degrees of temperatures. In his tube, there's 80 degrees, close to where you would normally cook the pasta on land. But it's quite happy. And most of the food or the detoxification comes from this white hair on him, which are bacteria. This is another interesting guy from deep sea vent. This is called Riftia pachyptila. This is the gutless worm. Builds tube. You remember the big tube, white tubes with the red pinnacle I showed you? This is the tube. It's a giant tube worm. It's about 6 feet tall. You can very brittle, be careful. You can have them go around. Those are made of chitins, the same things that makes your nails. And this animal actually becomes 2 meters tall. Have it go around. It's coming from the front. And 2 meters tall, but they're gutless. They don't have a mouth. They don't have an intestine. They don't have digestive system. They have a huge sac filled with bacteria. And all the tube is doing is using this plume, this respiratory system, to capture CO2, hydrogen sulfide, bring it down to the bacteria. The bacteria do their trick, makes the sugar, and gives it to the animal in a very simplified way. But this is what they're doing. So basically, they're a cultivation system for bacteria. And they're absolutely crowding deep sea vents. And the deep sea vent not only showed us that there are fantastic unexplored places at the sea bottom, but also told us that life does things that are unexpected. And in this place, this is believed now to be one of the places where life could have been originated, because for a long time Earth had no oxygen, virtually, so that means there was no photosynthesis, at least oxygenic photosynthesis. For about 2 billion years, somebody else has been living without using photosynthesis. So chemosynthesis, what bacteria do at deep sea vent, is now one of the prime targets for research into the origin of life. And these are also implications for the way we can look life on other planets, because we're not bound anymore to look for oxygen to have complex life. You can have complex multicellular life also supported by potentially other kind of metabolism. And I know I'm running out of time. Can I continue a little more? 5 minutes. I wanted just to mention that, as Robert said, do you know how many people went to the moon in total? Anybody? Yes? 12 people walked on the moon, and 24 total landed on the moon. And then, you know how many people went to the bottom, the very deepest bottom of the ocean? Yes? 3. You know who they are? Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard in 1960s, the first expedition to go to the Mariana Trench, the Challenger's Deep. And the third person was James Cameron in 2012. That's it. 3 people, no more. It's done. And nobody can use Cameron sub again because it's not certified to be a research sub. So right now, to do research, you need a big ship. We used to do it like this, with giant metal sphere where people just crawl inside and go down. But now we're using things that are a bit more fancy. Those are Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard in the first dive, 1960, 23 January 1960. The deepest point of the ocean for the first time. Yes? Nothing, okay. This is the Trieste, built in Italy, sold to the US Navy just before. This is while they were putting it at sea for the first time in Italy. Shortly after has been used by the US to reach the depth of the ocean. And nobody else did it from the 60s to 2012. And we don't know how long it's going to be before somebody else does it again. This is the sub from James Cameron. This is what we use today. This is the Alvin. This is a picture I took on the ship 2 years ago, just before the launch. And you may think technology has advanced a lot from the 60s and the big metal sphere I showed you, but actually, there's not that much space. All the sub is just to contain instrument. The actual sub is a ball here where you're sitting inside. And the ball is a really crammed space with all the equipment. And even bigger sub, they hold multiple people. Like the one I dive, this one, this is the pilot and another scientist. We're inside the Alvin right now. It's about 6 feet in diameter. Then you put all the computer, all the oxygen, all the equipment, all the gas mask, all the safety. There's not really much space. Yes? Yeah, you can sit from this place to this place to this place. And no, there is gravity. The gravity stays the same. The gravity doesn't change. But what it changes is that you're stuck in a small metal sphere for 8 to 9 hours until you go up. And you have no contact with the ship physically. You have a hydrophone you can speak with, but you're not attached to the ship. You're a free-floating, self-sufficient ship, if you want. And then we have, of course, everybody knows lander and rover from Mars and the moon. But what people don't realize is that we have a lot of them people also imagine going mining in other planets and asteroids and things like that. And there's a lot of sci-fi art made for this. People don't realize we have hundreds of robots exploring the ocean right now. Hundreds of them, all over the place. And some of them, this is a small research ROV. This is, look at the scale of the person in front. This is a mining robot. We are mining the deep sea right now. Look how scary is this one. Look how big it is. You know, the sci-fi we're doing for space is what is the edge of technology going on right now here on Earth. And even spacesuit, you can see this one. They're not that dissimilar from the deep diving suit we're using today. That's the new exosuit, $1 million suit we're using for deep sea diving. Look at them, they're not that dissimilar. There's a lot of parallel similarity within the two. And this is 1882. 1882, the year. Carmagnol designed this suit, one of the first working deep diving suits. We've been making exploration diving suit long before we thought about going into space. I don't know why that stopped suddenly. And so I just hope that I inspired you to think about the planet in the future like a place where we know little and we need to explore. And for example, the ocean. This is the amount of water is on Earth right now. If you remove all the water, that's the water. It's not much. We think there's a lot of water. There's not a lot. That's it. And this is Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter. That's the amount of water below the icy surface. It's very similar. So our experience here goes beyond that. And this is Vance geyser, hydrothermal geyser on Enceladus. So a lot of what we do now on Earth could be applied on space exploration later. I just want to tell everyone that if you're interested, there's this movie that has been done by Ruggers, Volcanoes of the Deep. You can find it on Hulu, DVD. I may bring down a few DVD for the library so people can borrow it to use it and so on. And I wanted to thank you and apologize if I've been a little over time.